first class right now!
This is my assigned seat.
Move now, or I call security!
What safety rule did I break?
He has done nothing wrong.
This was a misunderstanding!
No, it was a decision.
Document everything! No one leaves!
Sir, you need to leave first class now. The words cut across the cabin so sharply that a man in the second row lowered his newspaper mid-sentence. Marcus Bennett looked up from seat 3A. He did not move. Outside the oval window, rain streaked across the glass at Chicago O'Hare. Inside, the boarding lights burned bright against polished metal, cream leather, and tired faces. A coffee cart rattled near the forward galley, then went still. Claire Dawson stood in the aisle beside him. She was the senior flight attendant, 43 years old, immaculate Navy uniforms, silver wings pinned above her name tag. Her smile was controlled, but her eyes were not. Behind her stood Harold and Evelyn Whitmore. Harold was 61, broad through the shoulders with silver's hair and an expensive gray suit. He tapped 2 fingers against the fake set of his gold watch. Evelyn, 58, held a cream leather handbag against her side. Her pearl earrings caught the overhead light as she leaned slightly into the aisle. Marcus rested both hands on the armrests. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was calm. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" Claire's smile tightened. "You're seated in the wrong section." A few passengers turned. Just small movements. A chin lifting, a shoulder shifting, a magazine lowering by an inch. Marcus glanced at the boarding pass resting beside his phone. Westbridge Air Flight 826. Chicago to San Francisco. First class. Seat 3A. He picked it up and held it toward her. Claire looked at the paper for less than a second. Not long enough to reach it, less than a cent. Long enough to pretend. "There appears to be a seating adjustment," she said. Marcus watched her face. He had spent years in meetings where people used soft language to hide hard decisions. Restructuring meant layoffs. Flexibility meant surrender. Miscommunication meant someone powerful did not want to admit what they had done. A seating adjustment meant they wanted him gone. Harold stepped closer. "Claire, we have a connection in San Francisco," he said. "We always sit in this row." Claire turned toward him and something changed. Her shoulders softened, her voice warmed. "I understand, Mr. Whitmore. We'll take care of it." Marcus heard the difference. So did everyone else. Evelyn gave him a thin smile. "Perhaps you misunderstood your reservation," she said. "These systems can be confusing." Marcus looked at her. She did not sound cruel. That was what made it worse. Cruelty was easy to recognize when it shouted, harder when it wore pearls and spoke as though it were offering help. "I did not misunderstand anything," Marcus said. "I booked this seat 3 weeks ago." Claire folded her arms. "Sir, this area is reserved for our premium passengers." The word premiums hung in the air. Marcus felt an old pressure settle behind his ribs. He had felt it in hotel lobbies, private clubs, corporate receptions, places where people looked past him in search of the person they assumed was in charge. He had learned not to react quickly. Anger gave strangers permission to rewrite the story. So he breathed once, slowly. "I am a premium passenger," he said. He reached into his jacket and removed his Westbridge Platinum card. He placed it on top of the boarding pass. Claire glanced down, again, too quickly. Evelyn shifted her handbag to the other arm. Harold exhaled through his nose. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Do you know how much we spend with this Airlines?" Marcus turned his head toward him. "No," he said, "and you don't know anything about me." The sense landed harder than his volume suggested. A younger man in row 4 raised his phone slightly. The sens pointed toward the aisle. His hand Tresket, he recording. Claire codiced. Her expression sharpened. "Sir, we are trying to avoid a delay," she said. "I need you to cooperate." Marcus looked back at her. "Cooperate with what? With the seat and change? For what reason?" Claire paused. Harold's fingers tapping his watch, the soft hum of the air system, the rain against the windows, the low murmurs from the SO system, every sound from the jet bridge. Every sound became clearer. Claire lowered her voice. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore are long-standing customers. They regularly sit in this row." Marcus nodded once. A woman across the aisle pressed a same as a sign. A woman across the aisle pressed her lips together. "We can find you another seat. Where? There may be space farther back." In first class? Claire did not answer. Marcus looked down at his ticket, then back at her. I paid for this seat, he said. I boarded correctly. I showed you my documentation. I have not raised my voice. I have not threatened anyone. His tone remained even, but something in the cabin had shifted. Passengers were no longer watching disagreement. They were watching a decision being exposed. Marcus turned his eyes toward Harold and Evelyn. So tell me, he said, what exactly makes me the person who has to move? No one spoke. Claire's fingers tightened around her tablet. Harold's face reddened. Marcus remained seated. Calm. Still. Unmoved. What none of them knew was that Marcus Bennett was not simply another business traveler. He was the founder and chief executive officer of Bennett Digital Solutions, and the airline trying to remove him from first class was scheduled to ask for his signature the next morning. Claire Dawson looked down at the tablet in her hand. For the first time, she actually read the screen. Passenger. Cabinson, first class. Seat 3A. Status confirmed. There was no error. No duplicate assignment, no system warning. The truth was sitting in her palm, bright and undeniable. Marcus watched her eyes move across the screen. Understood. A tiny pause. A shallow breath. Her thumb stopped above the glass. Then her expression hardened. Sir, she said, I still need your cooperation. The younger man in row 4 lifted his phone a little higher. Marcus looked at Claire, not the camera. You just confirmed my seat. I confirmed what the system currently shows. Currently? Claire shifted her weight. Sometimes passenger records are updated during boarding. Was mine updated? She did not answer. Harold Whitmore stepped into the silence. This is taking far too long, he said. My wife and I have flown this route for years. Everyone knows where we sit. His voice carried the confidence of a man who had confused familiarity with ownership. Evelyn touched his sleeve. Harold, don't argue, she said. Then she looked at Marcus. Some people enjoy turning simple matters into public scenes. Marcus held her gaze. I was sitting quietly until your preference became my problem. Evelyn's lips pressed together. Across the aisle, an older woman named Barbara Collins lowered her reading glasses. She was 69, with silver hair pinned neatly behind her ears, and a blue wool coat folded across her lap. She had spent most of her life teaching middle school in Indiana. She knew the sound of a person being blamed for resisting something unfair. She also knew the weight of staying silent. But she said nothing yet. Claire tapped the tablet again. We are trying to board on time, she said. I can offer you another seat and travel another first-class seat? Claire's eyes flicked toward the rear of the plane. There may be an available seat in the main cabin with extra legroom. A murmur moved through the nearby rows. Not loud, just enough. Marcus leaned back against the leather seat, so a main cabin because Mr. Whitmore prefers a seat. Claire's face flushed. That is not how I would describe it. How would you describe it? As an accommodation. For whom? The question landed cleanly. Harold looked toward the galley. Evelyn adjusted her handbag. Claire glanced at the passengers watching the cabin air. Zame seemed colder now. Marcus had learned something during years of negotiation. People often relied on vague words when the truth could not survive direct language. Accommodation, cooperation, adjustment, concern. Words could soften almost anything, even discrimination. He kept his voice calm. Please explain why my confirmed reservation matters less than Facestitas. Claire's fingers tightened around the tablet. You are becoming argumentative. The younger man recording swallowed. Marcus noticed the tremor in his hand. He also noticed the way several passengers lowered their eyes. Some were uncomfortable with Claire's behavior. Others were uncomfortable because Marcus refused to make the situation easy for them. Justice often depended on that Dix piece, even when peace required the wrong person to surrender. My tone has not changed, Marcus said. My ticket has not changed. My seat has not changed. He paused. Only your explanation has changed. Barbara's eyes lifted. The words reached her. Claire drew in a slow breath. Mr. Bennett, refusing a reasonable request from the crew can create a serious issue. Marcus heard the shift. The conversation was no longer about a seat or threat. He had seen that pattern before. First, a request, then a warning, then the person resisting unfair treatment became the danger. What safety instruction am I refusing? He asked. This is not only about safety. Then what is it about? Claire looked past him. Harold answered. It is about respect for loyal customers. Marcus turned toward him. I am a customer. You know what I mean. Harold gave a short laugh. Evelyn looked at the floor for half a second. Something flickered across her face. Not remorse. Recognition, then it disappeared. Claire lowered her voice. But the cabin was too quiet to make anything private. If you continue to refuse, I will have to call my cabin manager. Please do. The answer came so quickly that Claire blinked. She had expected hesitation, maybe fear, maybe a quiet surrender once authority entered the conversation. Marcus gave her neither. He picked up his boarding pass and placed it carefully on the armrest. Ask your manager to bring the passenger manifest, he said, and ask him to explain, in front of everyone here, why a confirmed passenger is being removed for someone else's comfort. Harold's face darkened. You are making this bigger than it needs to be. Marcus looked at him. No, I am asking you to see how big it already is. Barbara felt something tighten in her throat. She thought of students she had taught years earlier. Children who were punished for speaking back when they were only defending themselves. Children labeled difficult because adults did not want to admit they had been unfair. She had told those children to use their voices. Now her own voice remained trapped behind her teeth. Claire turned sharply and walked toward the forward galley. Her shoes struck the carpet in quick, hard steps. Evelyn watched her leave, then leaned closer to Harold. She should have handled this quietly, she whispered. Marcus heard her. That was the plan, wasn't it, he said. Evelyn looked at him. What, to make me move quietly? For the first time, she had no prepared answer. The rain continued sliding down the window beside Marcus. Beyond the glass, ground crews moved beneath flashing amber lights. Inside the cabin, conversations had stopped completely. Claire reached the galley and spoke urgently to a tall man in a dark vest. Thomas Keller's cabin services manager listened with his arms crossed. Thomas looked down the aisle. He saw Marcus seated calmly. He saw the Whitmore standing beside him. He saw phones recording. And before hearing Marcus say a single word, Thomas chose the story that felt easiest to believe. He straightened his jacket and started walking toward seat 3A. Thomas Keller stopped beside seat 3A and looked down at Marcus. He was 50 years old, tall, broad through the shoulders, with close-cut brown hair and a navy vest marked with the Westbridge Air emblem. His posture was rigid. His expression had already settled into the calm authority of a man who believed he was arriving to solve a problem. Mr. Bennett, he said, I'm Thomas Keller, cabin services manager. I understand you're refusing to cooperate with the Ceasington adjustment. Marcus looked up at him. That's no problem with my... Thomas gave a thin smile. The words changed the air. Harold folded his arms. Evelyn lifted her chin. Claire stood just behind Thomas, holding her tablet tightly against her waist. Marcus kept both hands visible on the armrests. Then, as his smile disappeared. Thomas's smile disappeared. A phone camera shifted in row 4. The young man recording, Jason Miller, tried to steady his breathing. He had not expected the situation to go this far. He had only wanted to document what his saw. Now every person in authority seemed to be closing around Marcus. Thomas leaned slightly forward. My crew has asked you to move so we can resolve a seating concern and complete boarding. I need you to work with us. Marcus glanced at Claire's tablet. Did she tell you the system confirms me in this seat? Thomas paused. Claire answered quickly. The system shows him in 3A, but the Whitmores are long-standing premium customers. They regularly use this row. Thomas nodded, as though that settled something. Marcus saw it clearly. The facts had arrived. They simply had tight smallin, Marcus said. Let me make sure I understand, Marcus said. My boarding pass is valid, but my reservation is confirmed. There is no duplicate ticket. There is no equipment change. There is no safety issue. Thomas's jaw tightened. We are offering you a reasonable alternative. Where? There are seats available farther back. In first class? Thomas did not answer. The silence answered for him. Marcus looked toward Harold and his assigned seat. Harold shifted. Evelyn spoke before her husband could. Place, can you say sit there? Say sound, Freya and Sue. Say its face. Tighten. Evelyn's face tightened. That is not the point. It is exactly the point. A quiet breath moved through the cabin. Thomas turned slightly, checking the passengers nearby. More faces were watching now. A woman in the second row had lowered her magazine completely. A man near the aisle stopped adjusting his cuff links. Barbara Collins sat very still, her eyes fixed on Thomas. Mr. Bennett, we are trying to prevent a delay. Marcus nodded. So am I. Ask them to sit in their assigned seat. Harold let out a sharp laugh. This is unbelievable. Marcus turned his head. What is unbelievable? Harold's face reddened. That passenger can hold up an entire aircraft over a seat. You are standing in the aisle because you want mine. Harold opened his mouth, then closed it. Thomas's voice hardened. Sir, your attitude is becoming part of the problem. Marcus felt the old pressure behind his ribs again. Not surprise, recognition. He had watched this happen in boardrooms. A person raised a concern. The concern was ignored. Then the person's tone became the focus. The original harm disappeared behind a discussion about manners. My attitude has not changed, Marcus said. I have answered every question. I have shown my documentation. I am still seated. I have not threatened anyone. Claire shifted behind Thomas. You have refused a crew request. A crew request is not automatically reasonable. Thomas straightened. Crew instructions are not optional. Safety instructions are not optional, Marcus replied. This is not a safety instruction. The cabin went still. Thomas's eyes narrowed. For the first time, he seemed to understand that Marcus was not confused. He knew the difference between authority and misuse of authority. Thomas lowered his voice. If a passenger refuses to follow a sentence from the crew, to follow directions from the crew, that can become a serious matter. There it was. Marcus looked directly at him. Are you telling me that sitting in my assigned seat makes me a safety's concern? Thomas hesitated. Claire looked at him. Harold looked away. Marcus continued. Is there a federal regulation requiring me to surrender a confirmed first-class seat because another passenger prefers the window? Thomas's face flushed. No one is saying that. Then say what you are saying. The words were quiet, sharp, precise. Thomas glanced toward Jason. Sir, you need to stop recording. Jason stiffened. I'm not interfering. This is a private cabin matter. Marcus turned his head slightly. This is a commercial aircraft. He is a passenger witnessing what is happening in front of him. Thomas looked back at Marcus. I am speaking to him, and he answered. Jason's fingers tightened around the phone. His voice shook, but he kept it clear. I'm documenting the interaction. I'm staying in my seat. I'm not blocking anyone. Claire stepped forward. You need to put the phone away. Barbara finally moved. She removed her glasses and folded them in her lap. Leave him alone, she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried. Claire turned. Mom, please stay out of this. Barbara looked at Marcus, then at Claire. I stayed out of it too long. The sentence settled over the cabin. Marcus felt something shift inside him. He did not need saving. He had learned long ago not to expect it. But there was something deeply human in hearing another person refuse to look away. Thomas did not like losing control of the room. He straightened his jacket. Mr. Bennett, this is your final opportunity to cooperate voluntarily. If you refuse, I may have to involve airport security. Harold's shoulders relaxed. Evelyn exhaled. Claire's grip loosened around her tablet. The familiar shape of authority had returned. A warning, a threat, a path toward removal. Marcus looked at each of them. Then he reached slowly into the inside pocket of his jacket. Thomas's body stiffened. Marcus removed a slim black leather card holder and placed it on the armrest. No sudden movement, no raised voice, no fear. Before you make this a security matter, he said, I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. Thomas stared at the card holder. For the first time since entering the cabin, doubt crossed his face. Thomas Keller kept his eyes on the black card holder. It was plain leather. No gold edge, no oversized logo. That made design to impress. People who needed to prove their importance usually carried it loudly. Marcus, what you're implying, Thomas said. I know what you're his quietly. I'm not implying anything. Marcus rested one hand beside the card holder. I'm asking you to be exact. Claire shifted behind Thomas. She wanted him to move faster. She wanted security called before more passengers began recording, before the questions became evidence, before the situation escaped the narrow language she had built around it. But Thomas hesitated. The delay irritated Harold. This is absurd, he said. We are being held hostage by a man trying to make a point. Marcus turned slowly toward him. I am not making a point. His voice was low. I am refusing to be erased. The words held the cabin. Barbara Collins lowered her eyes to her folded glasses. The sentence reached a place in her that had been quiet for years. She remembered a student, Terrence, a bright boy who had once refused to give up a library computer to another child simply because a staff member found the other child easier to manage. Terrence had been labeled disrespectful. Barbara had told him to calm down before she had asked what happened. She had apologized later, but later had never felt clean. Now she saw the same pattern unfolding in first class, then punished for refusing to accept it. Evelyn leaned toward Harold. "This is what happens," she whispered. "Everything becomes an accusation." She meant for only her husband to hear. The cabin heard anyway. Marcus looked at Thomas. "If you are ordering me to move, state the reason." Thomas's jaw tightened. "The reason is cabin management. It is my authority." "That is not a reason either. Short sentences. No room to hide." Claire stepped forward. "Sir," you looked directly at her. My sauce has not changed. My seat assignment has changed. My sauce assignment has not changed." Jason's phone remained steady. Now, I'd disappear. His fear had not disappeared. It had changed shape. He worked as a community college counselor in California. Every week, he met students who apologized before asking for help. Students who believed needing fairness made them a burden. Watching Marcus sit there, calm and unbent, made courage look less like a personality and more like a choice. Thomas looked at Jason again, put the phone away. Jason swallowed. "I'm not interfering. This is an internal crew matter. It is happening in front of passengers." Claire's face flushed. "Monst, you were already told to stop recording." Lifted her chin. "And he already told you he was not interfering." Claire turned toward her. "Mom, please let us do our jobs." Barbara's voice remained quiet. "Your job is not to make a valid passenger disappear." A soft murmur moved through the cabin. Thomas felt control slipping. He straightened, shoulders rigid. "Mr. Bennett, I am giving you one final opportunity. Move voluntarily, or I will contact airport security." Harold exhaled with relief. Evison's fingers loosened around her handbag. Claire stood taller. The threat had sourced something familiar: authority, consequence, fear. Marcus looked at the three of them. Then he opened the card holder. The leather made a soft sound as it folded back. Inside was a matte black business card. Marcus removed it and placed it face up on the tray table. Thomas reflected across the silver lettering. Marcus Bennett, founder and chief executive officer. Bennett Digital Solutions. Thomas's lips parted. Claire stopped breathing. For a second, she knew it. Everyone in premium service management knew it. Bennett Digital Solutions had been mentioned in internal briefings for weeks. Westbridge Air was negotiating with the company to replace its failing customer service platform. The old system had become a public embarrassment. Complaints vanished. Cases were misrouted. Passengers received inconsistent responses depending on which department handled them. The new platform was supposed to track service failures, preserve records, and identify patterns of unequal treatment. Claire had skimmed the briefing during a break. She had barely read the section about bias detection. Now the man behind that system sat in seat 3A, the man she had called uncooperative, the man she had tried to move after confirming his ticket was valid. Thomas stared at the card as if the words might change. Harold frowned. "What is that supposed to look at him? It proves nothing." He tapped the boarding beside the card. This already closed her eyes for a moment. Wad what closed her for a moment. That was the part that mattered. Not the company, not the title, not the contract. Marcus had been right before anyone knew who he was. He had been worthy of respect before his and frightened them. Thomas cleared his throat. "Mr. Bennett, I believe there may have been a misunderstanding." Marcus looked up. "No." Thomas froze. There was a decision. The cabin fell silent. Misunderstanding was soft. It asked no one to accept responsibility. Decision had weight. Decision meant someone had looked at the facts and chosen to ignore them. Claire stepped forward quickly. "Sir, if my tone made you feel uncomfortable, that was never my intention." Marcus turned toward her. "You did not make me feel uncomfortable." Claire's mouth tightened. "You tried to make me removable." The words landed harder than anger would have. Jason's phone captured every second. Thomas glanced down the aisle toward the aircraft door. Boarding had slowed. A gate employee stood near the entrance, speaking into a headset and looking toward first class. Thomas lowered his voice. Let's keep this from becoming larger than it needs to be. Marcus leaned back slightly. That choice was available before you threatened me with security. Thomas's face changed. Not shame, not yet. Calculation. He understood contracts. He understood corporate exposure. He understood how quickly a recorded service failure could move through legal departments and executive offices. What he did not yet understand was that Marcus was not interested in humiliating him. Marcus wanted something harder. Accuracy. Accountability. A gate agent stepped into the cabin. She was a black woman in her late 30s with tired eyes and a headset resting over one ear. Her name tag read Rachel Carter. Thomas, she said. Operations wants to know why boarding has stopped. Thomas turned too quickly. We're handling a seating issue. Rachel looked past, Harold standing in the aisle. Evelyn clutching her handbag, Claire pale beside the row. Marcus seated in 3A with his boarding pass and business card on the tray table. Several phones recording. Rachel's eyes sharpened. What kind of seating issue? Before Thomas could answer, Marcus spoke. A paid passenger in an assigned first class was asked to move because another passenger preferred the seat. Rachel looked at him, then at the boarding pass, then at the card. Her face became very still. Your name, sir? Marcus Bennett. The headset crackled against her ear. Rachel touched it with 2 fingers one moment. She turned slightly toward the jet bridge. Operations, this is Carter at Flight 826. I need confirmation of executive travel notes for passenger Marcus Bennett. Claire closed her eyes. Thomas stared at the floor. And Harold Whitmore finally stopped looking at his watch. Rachel Carter listened to the voice in her headset. Her expression changed slowly. First concentration, then recognition, then concern. She said. I'm standing in first class now. The cabin remained silent. No, security has not been called. Thomas Keller's eyes lifted sharply. Rachel listened again. I understand. I'll notify the captain. She lowered her hand from the headset and stepped fully into the cabin. Captain Rebecca Hayes is being advised. Claire Dawson's face lost color. Harold looked from Rachel to Marcus. Executive travel notes, he asked. What does that mean? No one answered him. Marcus picked up his phone. The screen showed several unread messages, but he ignored them and opened one contact. Olivia Bennett. She answered before the second ring. Marcus? Her voice was calm, but he heard the concern underneath. Olivia had worked beside him for 11 years. She knew he did not call during boarding, unless something had gone wrong. I need you to document an incident on Westbridge Air Flight 826, Marcus said. Claire looked toward him. Thomas did not move. Olivia's tone sharpened. What kind of incident? Marcus looked at Claire, then Thomas, then the Whitmores. Discriminatory service escalation. The words were clean, corporate, devastating. Olivia went quiet for half a second. They're witnesses? Multiple passengers are recording. Any physical contact? No. Threats? Airport security was threatened after I refused to surrender my confirmed first-class seat. Harold's face reddened. That is not what happened. Marcus did not look at him. Olivia continued. Do you want legal notified? Yes. Notify the board chair as well. Claire closed her eyes. Thomas stared at the business card on the tray table. Olivia understood the weight of that instruction. Bennett Digital Solutions was scheduled to present its final implementation plan to Westbridge Air the next morning. Months of meetings had led to that point. The contract would affect thousands of employees and millions of passengers. Do you want public relations involved? She asked. Not yet. Thomas looked up. Marcus's voice stayed even. Facts. That frightened Thomas more than anger would have. A furious passenger could be dismissed as emotional. A calm executive collecting evidence could not. Olivia spoke carefully. I'll preserve your call record. Board chair first. Legal second. I'll wait for your direction on the contract. Marcus ended the call and placed the phone beside his boarding pass. Thomas stepped closer. Mr. Bennett, perhaps we should slow this down. Marcus met his eyes. That is what I have been doing from the beginning. Claire flinched when he looked at her. Harold scoffed. You people are acting like he owns the airline. Marcus turned his head. I do not. Harold gave a short, humorless laugh. Then, Marcus continued. But I own the system your airline wants to buy. The cabin went dead quiet. Evelyn's lips parted. Claire stared at Marcus as though something about him had changed. Nothing. Navy suit. Same controlled breathing. Same valid ticket. Same quiet out dignity. That was the truth. None of them could escape. He had been the same man before the business card appeared. Before the phone call, before fear entered their faces. The only thing that changed was their estimate of his power. A door opened at the front of the cabin. Captain Rebecca Hayes stepped out of the cockpit. She was 54, with short gray hair, steady eyes, and the measured walks of someone who had made decisions under pressure. Her uniform was crisp. 4 gold stripes marked each shoulder. She stopped standing too rigid. Kale. Standing too rigid. Claire pale. Harold in the aisle. Evelyn gripping her handbag. Marcus seated in 3 rows raised, Rachel near the aircraft door. Rebecca did not ask for a quick summons in front of everyone. She looked at Thomas. Thomas walked toward her. Claire tried to follow. Rebecca raised one hand. Not yet. Stop. The command was quiet, but it landed harder than shouting. Thomas leaned close to the captain out and began seating in a lo-fi passenger refusal. Premium customer preference. Possible escalation. Each phrase tried to make the truth smaller. Rachel stepped forward. Captain. Operations confirmed executive notes. Mr. Bennett is Marcus Bennett of Bennett Digital Solutions. Rebecca's jaw tightened. A brief expression crossed her face. Not panic, regret. The kind a leader feels when a failure stops being a report and becomes a living scene. She walked toward row 3. Mr. Bennett, she said. I'm Captain Rebecca Hayes. I want to review exactly what happened. Marcus looked up at her. I have been asking for that since this began. Rebecca absorbed the sentence. Yes, she said, I understand. Harold stepped forward. Captain, my wife and I have flown with this airline for years. We always sit in this row. Rebecca turned to him. What seats are printed on your boarding passes? Harold's mouth tightened. That is not the issue. It is the first issue. Evelyn looked down. Our seats are 3C and 3D. Rebecca nodded. Then please take seats 3C and 3D. Harold stared at her. He waited for her expression to soften. It did not. This is unacceptable, he said. What happened here is unacceptable. Claire looked at the carpet. Thomas drew an atomet. Sticky stest. Harold moved toward 3C with stiff, angry steps. Evelyn followed and lowered herself into 3D, her handbag clutched in both hands. They had not lost a privilege. They had been told no. For people accustomed to being accommodated, the difference felt like humiliation. Rebecca turned toward Claire. Ms. Dawson stepped into the forward galley. Claire lifted her head. Captain, I was only trying to take care of loyal customers. Rebecca's eyes did not leave hers. You tried to remove a confirmed passenger without cause. Claire swallowed. He refused to cooperate. Marcus spoke before Rebecca could answer. I refuse to be moved for prejudice wrapped in procedure. The sentence stopped the cabin. Rebecca looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. We are going to document this properly. Marcus leaned back against the seat. Good. His voice softened, but the weight remained. Because this was never only about me. Rebecca Hayes turned toward the front of the cabin. Rachel, stop boarding for now. Rachel Carter nodded and touched her headset. Operations. Hold boarding on Flight 26, Captain's instruction. A wave of frustration moved through the jet bridge outside. Mosses, rolling bags stopped. Voices rose. A child asked why no one was moving. The ordinary sounds of airport travel pressed against E-class. No one spoke. Rebecca looked at Thomas Keller. I need a written statement from you before this aircraft departs. Thomas rubbed one hand across his jaw. Captain, we can document this after arrival. We are already behind schedule. No. The answer came without hesitation. We are not pushing back until the facts are preserved. Claire stood near the galley with her hands clasped in front of her uniform. Her breathing was shallow. Captain, with respect, this is becoming excessive. Rebecca turned toward her. A passenger was threatened with removal after presenting a valid ticket. That is not a minor service complaint. Claire's eyes moved toward Marcus. He refused an instruction. Rebecca's voice stayed level. Stop using that sentence as if it explains everything. The words landed hard. Barbara Collins watched Claire's face change. The polished certainty was beginning to crack. Not because Claire suddenly understood the harm, but because the language she had relied on was no longer protecting her. Jason Miller kept recording. His hand had steadied. Thomas noticed. We need those phones put away while statements are taken. Rebecca looked at him. No one is interfering with flight operations. Thomas lowered his voice. This could be postouts in line before we even leave the gate. This is not the immediate concern. It will become one. Rebecca's expression sharpened. The immediate concern is whether our crew treated a passenger unfairly and then tried to turn his refusal into a security matter. Thomas looked away. Rachel stepped closer. Operations is requesting names of everyone involved. Rebecca nodded. Start with the crew. Then ask passengers who witnessed the exchange if they are willing to provide contact information. Claire's head lifted. Everyone? Yes. The word left no room for negotiation. Harold Whitmore shifted in seat 3C. This has gone far enough, he said. We have connections to make. Marcus turned toward him. You were willing to delay the flight when you believed the delay would end with me leaving. Harold's face tightened. That is not fair. Marcus held his gaze. Fair would have been sitting in your assigned seat. Evelyn stared down at the stitching on her handbag. She had said very little since the captain arrived. The confidence she carried into the cabin had thinned into discomfort. She wanted to believe she had done nothing serious. She had not shouted. She had not touched Marcus. She had only expected the airline to make the problem disappear, but expectation could still harm someone. Sometimes cruelty did not need anger. Sometimes it only needed confidence that another person mattered less. Barbara looked toward Evelyn. You knew the seat was his, she said. Evelyn lifted her eyes. I thought the airline would accommodate us. They tried. Barbara's voice trembled, but she continued. They tried by humiliating him. Evelyn looked away. A man in row 5 leaned into the aisle. I saw the flight attendant check his ticket, he said. She knew it was valid. A woman across from him raised her hand slightly. I heard her say premium passengers belonged in this section. He had already shown his status card. Another voice came from behind them. He never raised his voice. Claire heard each statement. Her fingers curled against her palms. The story was changing because people were no longer allowing her to tell it alone. Rachel moved through the first-class cabin with a legal pad. Anyone willing to provide a statement? Please give me your full name and a phone number. Westbridge Air may contact you during the review. Jason lowered his phone just enough to speak. I have the entire interaction recorded. Thomas's eyes moved toward him. From what point? Before Mr. Keller arrived. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second, Rebecca noticed. So the initial exchange is documented? Jason nodded. Yes, Captain. Rebecca looked toward Rachel. Make sure he receives a secure upload link from corporate legal. Do not ask him to delete anything from his device. Thomas stepped closer. Captain, involving legal, before we understand the full context, may be premature. Rebecca, the recording is part of the context. Thomas said nothing. Marcus watched the captain carefully. She was doing what should have happened at the beginning. She was checking facts before protecting reputations. Sate asking had investigated harm. By too many institutions investigated harms. They treated truth as a threat instead of a responsibility. Rachel touched her headset again. Captain, corporate customer operations is asking to speak directly with Mr. Bennett. The cabin tightened. Claire's face became still. Thomas looked toward Marcus. Rebecca walked to the cabin phone mounted. Near the pat the call through. Later, a man's voice came through the speaker. Older, controlled, strained beneath professional polish. Mr. Bennett, this is David Monroe, Senior Vice President of Customer Experience for Westbridge Air. Marcus looked toward the speaker. I'm listening. First, I want to apologize for the confusion surrounding your seat assignments. Marcus's expression did not change. There was no confusion. Silence followed. David Monroe had expected an apology to create movement. Most corporate apologies were designed to lower emotion before anyone examined the details. Marcus did not let the sentence pass. David tried again. I apologize for the way the situation was handled. Marcus looked at Claire, then Thomas, then Harold and Evelyn. Handled by whom? No one moved. The speaker gave a soft burst of static. David cleared his throat. Mr. Bennett, we are still gathering information. You called to apologize before gathering information. The cabin went still. David paused. Marcus continued. What exactly are you apologizing for? Claire stared at the floor. Thomas folded his hands behind his back. Harold stopped checking his watch. The question was simple. That made it dangerous. A vague apology allowed everyone to leave with their dignity protected. A specific apology required the company to admit what had happened. David's voice returned slower. Now we apologize that you were asked to move from a confirmed first-class seat. Marcus waited. David continued, to accommodate another passenger's seating preference. A low murmur moved through the cabin. Marcus did not respond yet, and another pause. David's voice grew quieter. We also apologize that the request continued after your documentation confirmed your right to remain in seat 3A. Barbara pressed one hand against her chest. Jason kept the phone steady. Marcus leaned forward slightly. And why did it continue? No one breathed. David did not answer. Outside the aircraft, rain struck the windows in thin, steady lines. Inside, the question remained suspended above every person who had watched the truth and chosen comfort instead. David Monroe remained silent for 3 long seconds. It was enough time for everyone in the cabin to understand the problem. He could describe what happened. He could name the employees involved. But explaining why it happened meant admitting the airline had not simply mishandled a seat dispute. It had treated one passenger as less credible than another. The speaker crackled. Mr. Bennett, David said, that is what our internal review will determine. Marcus kept his eyes on the phone near the galley. No. His voice was quiet. Your review will determine who participated. The reason is already visible. Claire Dawson looked up. Thomas Keller's shoulders tightened. Harold Whitmore shifted in his seat. Marcus turned toward them, one by one. Mrs. Whitmore believed her preference said more than my confirmed reservation, and as if his spending scheme gave him a greater right to the seat. Accepted that assumption. Miss Dawson accepted that assumption. Mr. Keller escalated my refusal into a possible security issue. He paused. At every step, my ticket mattered less than their comfort with my presence. The words moved through the cabin like a current. No one interrupted. David's voice came through again. Mr. Bennett, we take allegations of unequal treatment very seriously. Marcus leaned back slightly. This is not an allegation. There are witnesses. There is video. There are system records. Thomas looked toward Jason. Jason held the phone steady. Marcus continued. I want all passenger service logs. I want the crew tablet records preserved. I want communication timestamps from the gate, the cabin, and operations. I want written statements from every employee involved. Claire's face tightened. David spoke carefully. We can begin collecting that information. I also want written confirmation that no passenger will face retaliation for recording or speaking up. Jason's loosened by a fraction. Barbara Collins looked at Marcus with a quiet respect that had replaced her earlier hesitation. David paused again. That should not be an issue, then confirm it. The cabin remained still. David's voice returned. Westbridge Air will not retaliate against any passenger who lawfully documented or reported this incident. Marcus nodded once, and I want an independent review. Thomas looked up sharply. David's answer came more slowly. Our Customer Experience Division has an established investigation process. Marcus's expression did not change. The same management chain responsible for handling complaints should not be the only group reviewing this. Mr. Bennett, we have compliance procedures. Then use them. We will outside customer operations. David took a breath. That request would need executive approval. Marcus looked down at his phone. Olivia had already sent a message. Board chair notified. Legal standing by. He turned the screen face down. Then get executive toward Evelyn. This is unbelievable, he whispered. Barbara heard him. She turned in her seat. What is unbelievable? That an entire flight is being held for one man's complaint. Barbara's face hardened. This flight was delayed because you wanted his seat. Harold's mouth tightened. I did not ask for all this. You asked the airline to make him move. That is not the same thing. Barbara's voice softened. That is how harm often works. People ask for the result, then separate themselves from the way someone else is hurt to achieve it. Evelyn looked down at her handbag. The words found her despite her effort to avoid them. She had not wanted Marcus threatened. She had only wanted the seat, but wanting the benefit without looking at the cost did not erase the cost. Marcus turned back towards the speaker. Mr. Monroe Bennett Digital Solutions was scheduled to review Westbridge Air's final partnership package tomorrow morning. David's voice lowered. Yes, that review is now suspended. Claire closed her eyes. Toss stared at the floor. The words hit with no raised volume. No threat, just consequence. David responded quickly. Mr. Bennett, that partnership is strategically important to both organizations. Marcus looked out the rain-streaked window. Integrity is strategically important. He turned back toward the galley. The partnership is paperwork. Silence. Even Harold stopped moving. David tried again. I understand your frustration. Marcus's eyes sharpened. This is not about frustration, the sentence cut cleanly. It is about whether your company can be trusted to build systems around fairness while ignoring unfairness in the cabin. Rachel Carter lowered her eyes for a moment. She understood the force of that point. Westbridge Air wanted software that could identify patterns of bias. Yet its own employees had ignored a valid ticket because the passenger did not match their expectation of who belonged in first class. Technology could expose patterns. It could not replace conscience. David spoke with less polish now. What would you require before the review can resume? Marcus answered immediately. Written confirmation of an independent investigation. Preservation of all relevant records. Protection for witnesses. A review of the decision-making process that allowed a preference request to become a security threat. He looked toward Claire, and no effort to reduce this to a misunderstanding. David was silent when hummed softly. Then he said, I need a few minutes to speak with the executive committee. You have 3. Thomas looked at Marcus. 3 minutes may not be realistic. Marcus met his eyes. Neither was asking me to move after confirming my seat. Thomas said nothing. The speaker went quiet. And time narrowed. The overhead lights felt the windows. The overhead lights felt too bright. Claire stood near the galley with her scarf still tied neatly at her throat. She remembered an old complaint from years earlier. A passenger had said she treated him as though he had entered a place he had not paid to be. Management had called it a communication issue. Claire had accepted that explanation because it allowed her to keep thinking of herself as fair. Now there were too many witnesses. Sales. Too many details, too little room to hide. Thomas stared at the aisle carpet. He replayed his own words. Serious matter. Crew authority. Security. He had used them automatically. That was what disturbed him most. A person could cause real harm without ever sounding angry. Sometimes official language made injustice easier because it allowed the speaker to stop thinking. The phone crackled again. David returned. Mr. Bennett, the executive committee has approved an independent review. Written confirmation is being sent to your office and council now. All relevant records will be preserved. Marcus checked his phone. A new message from Olivia appeared. Confirmation received. He placed the phone down. Thank you. The courtesy made Claire lower her eyes. Rebecca Hayes stepped toward the cabin phone. Mr. Monroe, I am holding departure until replacement cabin leadership is assigned. Claire's head snapped up. Captain. Rebecca did not look at her. Ms. Dawson, you are relieved from first-class service pending review. The cabin went silent again. Claire's mouth opened. I have served this airline for 16 years. Rebecca turned toward her. Then you knew better. Claire Dawson stood frozen beside the galley. For one moment, she looked less like a senior flight attendant and more like a woman who had just realized that years of experience could not excuse one clear choice. Her hands opened and closed at her sides. Captain, I was trying to protect the operation. Rebecca Hayes held her gaze. You weren't. Taking a preference, Claire looked toward Marcus. He did not look triumphant. That unsettled her more than anger would have. If he had shouted, she could have called him hostile. If he had insulted her, she could have placed herself among the injured. But Marcus remained seated, his breathing steady, his boarding pass still visible beside the black business card. Thomas, about me, Rebecca, for her to hide. Thomas Keller cleared his throat. And what about me? Provide a complete written statement before departure. Operations will decide whether you remain on. On duty. Thomas nodded once. He had expected a reprimand, perhaps a private warning, not uncertainty. For years, he had believed leadership meant ending conflict quickly. He had measured success by on-time departures and quiet cabins. Now he understood the danger in that habit. A problem removed was not always a problem solved. Sometimes it was a person pushed out of sight. Rate supervisor is waiting on the jet bridge. Claire looked at Rachel, then down at her uniform. Claire looked at Rachel, then down at her uniform. Her silver wings caught the white cabin light. She touched them once, a small motion, almost protective.
I need to collect my things.
Rebecca nodded. You may do that in the galley. Claire turned away. The sound of her shoes was slower now. No sharp authority, no clipped confidence, just footsteps. Harold Whitmore watched her go. This is completely out of proportion, he said. Looked toward him. A passenger was threatened with removal from a seat he paid for. Harold lifted both hands. I never asked anyone to threaten him. Marcus turned toward him. You asked them to make me move. That is not the same thing. It became the same thing when they decided your comfort mattered more than my rights. Harold's face tightened. He looked toward the window. Evelyn sat beside him with her handbag resting in her lap. Her fingers traced the edge of the leather. She remembered Claire asking whether the airline should move Marcus. She had not said yes directly. She had smiled. She had waited. She had allowed this answer to form around her silence. That realization landed slowest. It did not feel dramatic. It felt worse. Ordinary. I did not think it would go this far, Evelyn said. Barbara Collins turned toward her. That does not mean it began harmlessly. Evelyn looked at the older woman. Barbara's voice softened. Most harm does not begin with someone planning the worst outcome. It begins with someone deciding another person should carry the inconvenience. The words settled over the row. Evelyn lowered her eyes. For a policeman, flight attendant appeared at the aircraft to start. She was a black woman in her early 50s with calm eyes and a composed expression. Her name tag read Angela Foster. Angela listened without her near the entrance. Rachel spoke quietly to her, interrupting. She did not stare wet at Marcus. She did not whisper to the other passengers. She simply nodded and stepped into the cabin. Captain Hayes, she said, I'm ready to take over first-class service. Rebecca gave her a brief summary. Angela listened again. Then she walked directly to Marcus. Mr. Bennett, my name is Angela Foster. I'll be serving this cabin today. Her voice was warm but professional. May I bring you water while we reset the cabin? Marcus looked up at her. Yes, please. Still or sparkling? Still. Of course. That was all. No suspicion. No demand for another document. No performance of apology. Just service. The exisa happened. Ordinary respect felt almost sacred. Barbara watched Angela walk toward the galley. Her eyes filled. She turned toward Marcus. Mr. Bennett. He looked at her. I am sorry I did not speak sooner. Marcus, no performance speak sooner. Marcus studied her face. There was smoke when it mattered. He said. Barbara shook her head. I should have spoken when it started. Her voice broke slightly. I spent most of my life teaching children that silence helps the person doing harm. Then I sat here and waited because I did not want to make things worse. Marcus's expression softened. Fear does that. Barbara pressed her folded glasses between her palms. I thought courage would feel stronger. It usually does not. Marcus paused. Most of the time, it feels like speaking while your voice shakes. Barbara let out a breath that sounded close to a sob. Jason lowered his phone. He had recorded nearly everything, but now he'd less like its witness, like someone changed by what he had seen. Mr. Bennett, he said, corporate legal sent me the upload link. Marcus nodded. Keep your original copy. Jason glanced toward Thomas. I will. Rachel moved through the cabin, collecting names and contacting. Several passengers volunteered statements now, more than before. A man in row 5 described Claire checking the tablet. A woman across the aisle repeated Harold's comments about how much he spent with the airline. Another passenger confirmed that Marcus had never raised his voice. The truth became harder to bury with every name. She had folded turned from the galley without her scarf. A supervisor it carefully and held it in one hand. Claire stopped beside Rebecca. I am ready. Rebecca nodded. Claire looked toward Marcus, her lips parted. For a second it seemed she might apologize. Instead, she said, I never meant for this to happen. Marcus met her eyes. Intent does not erase impact. Claire swallowed, he continued. But what you do after understanding the impact still matters. The sentence struck her differently from everything else. It was not forgiveness. It was not condemnation. It was a responsibility. Claire looked down at the scarf in her hand. Then she walked off the aircraft. No applause. No cheers. Only the sound of rain and distant airport announcements entering through the open door. Rebecca faced the cabin. We will resume boarding shortly. Before we do, I want to make one thing clear. Every passenger deserves the same respect under the same rules. She looked toward Marcus. What occurred here failed that standard. Marcus rested one hand on the armrest. His phone buzzed. Olivia had sent another message. Independent review confirmed. Records preserved. Board supports suspension of the partnership review. Marcus read it once, then again. Power had consequences. But power was not what made him right. The ticket had made him right. His humanity had made him worthy. The power only forced the room to admit what it should have recognized from the beginning. The cabin door remained open while the last statements were collected. Rain tapped against the aircraft windows. The sound was steady now. Softer than before, but impossible to ignore. Outside, passengers waited on the jet bridge with tired faces and restless hands. Some checked their watches. Others leaned toward the doorway, trying to understand why boarding had stopped. Inside first class, the truth was being written down. Thomas Keller sat in the forward galley with a blank incident form in front of him. For several minutes, he did not write. He stared at the first line. Describe the event in your own words. His own words had become the passenger refusal. Crew authority. Security concern. Each phrase had sounded professional when he used it. Now on paper, they looked incomplete. He had not asked why Marcus was being moved before supporting Claire. He had not checked the passenger manifest. He had not examined the alternatives. He had looked at the scene and chosen the story that required the least effort. Thomas finally placed his pen against the paper. I responded to a seating dispute in first class. He stopped. Dispute suggested two people with equal claims. There had not been two equal claims. He crossed it out. At approximately boarding time, I responded, after it confirmed his refused the sentence to surrender his assigned seat. The sentence made his stomach tighten. It was accurate. That was why it hurt. Across the cabin, Angela Foster placed a glass of water on Marcus's tray table. Here you are, Mr. Bennett. Thank you. Would you like anything else before we close the door? No, this is fine. Angela nodded and moved on. She did not linger. She did not treat him like an exhibit. She did not try to repair the entire situation with exaggerated kindness. She simply gave him the same respect she gave everyone else. Marcus lifted the glass but did not drink immediately. His hand was steady. Inside, he felt exhausted. People often mistook calm for the absence of pain. They saw a controlled face and assumed the person had not been wounded. Self-control did not erase humiliation. It only prevented humiliation from choosing his next action. His phone buzzed. Olivia, whether you are safe, she said. The board chair wants to know whether you are safe, she said. I am. Are you still on the aircraft? Yes. Legal firm preservation notices were sent to Westbridge Air. They also requested the video directly from the witness. Marcus looked towards Jason. Jason was speaking with Rachel near row 4, confirming his email address. Good. Olivia hesitated. The board wants to suspend all implementation activity, not just tomorrow's review. Marcus watched rain move across the window. Do it. There was a pause. That will affect the training teams already scheduled for next week. I know. And the integration group. I know. Olivia lowered her voice. Marcus, are you sure? He closed his eyes for half a second. This was the part no one in the cabin could see. Suspending the partnership was not a dramatic gesture. It would cost time. It could affect employees at both companies. People who had nothing to do with what happened might face uncertainty. Power was easy to admire from a distance. Responsibility was heavier. I do not want punishment for people who were not involved, Marcus said. Keep the technical teams informed. No layoffs, no canceled contractor payments. Understood. But nothing moves forward until the independent review has a scope, a timeline, and authority to recommend changes. Olivia exhaled slowly. I'll draft the notice. Make it clear this is not retaliation. Should I call it? Marcus looked toward Thomas in the galley. A trust review. Olivia went quiet. Then she said, that is the right phrase. Marcus ended the call. Harold Whitmore had been listening from across the aisle. A trust review, he repeated. You are putting an entire business deal at risk because of one bad interaction. Marcus turned toward him. One interaction revealed how decisions are made when no one expects consequences. Harold shook his head. That does not represent company. No, Marcus said. But how a company responds will. Evelyn looked at Marcus. Her face was tired now. What would satisfy you? The question was quieter than anything she had said before. Marcus studied her. This is not about satisfying me. Then what is it about? Making sure the next passenger does not need a business card to be believed. Evelyn looked down. The answer reached her. She imagined someone without a title. Someone's older, someone nervous, someone who might have moved because they were afraid of security. Someone wondered whether they had done something wrong. And her shoulders lowered. I should not have asked for the seat, she said. Harold turned toward her. Evelyn. She did not look at him. I knew it was assigned to him. Harold's jaw tightened. You asked for an accommodation, no. Her voice trembled. I expected one. She looked at Marcus, and I did not care what it would cost you. The cabin remained quiet. Marcus did not rush to comfort her. An apology deserved space, but it did not erase the harm. Thank you for saying it clearly, he said. Evelyn nodded once. Her eyes filled, but she did not wipe them. Harold stared out the window. He was not ready. Some people reached accountability through reflection. Others reached it only after losing the ability to control the room. Rachel stepped toward Captain Hayes. All passengers' statements are collected. Legal has Jason's recording. Operations says the replacement staffing is complete. Rebecca looked toward Thomas. Your statement? Thomas stood and handed her the form. Rebecca read the first paragraph. Her expression did not change, but she looked at him differently when she finished. You wrote that you failed to verify the reason for the seating request. Yes. You also wrote that Mr. Bennett did not threaten anyone. Yes, and that you introduced the possibility of security without identifying a safety concern. Thomas swallowed. Yes. Rebecca folded the form. Thomas nodded. I know. For the first time, there was no defense in his voice. Rebecca looked toward operations staff at the doorway. Mr. Keller will not continue on this flight. Thomas closed his eyes briefly. Then he removed his name badge. He did not argue. He walked toward Marcus and stopped one row away. Mr. Bennett. Marcus looked up. Thomas held the badge in one hand. I made assumptions before I checked the facts. Marcus said nothing. Thomas continued. I used my authority to support those assumptions. I am sorry. The apology was not It did not ask for forgiveness. That made it sound real. Marcus held his gaze. Learn from the part that happened before you knew my title. Tusmus nodded slowly. The part I cannot stop thinking about. He stepped away and left the aircraft. Rebecca waited until the door area was clear. Then she faced the cabin. We will resume boarding. Departure will remain delayed, but this aircraft will leave with a complete record of what occurred. The remaining passengers began entering again. Rolling bags, quiet greetings, careful glances. The cabin returned to motion, but not to what it had been. Marcus remained in seat 3A. He finally lifted the glass of water and drank. The water was cool. His throat had been dry for nearly an hour. As he set the glass down, he realized how much tension he had carried without noticing. Barbara watched him from across the aisle. You look tired, she said. Marcus gave a small nod. I am. She offered him a gentle smile. Standing your ground takes energy. Marcus looked out at the rain. So does being asked to prove you deserve the ground beneath you? Barbara lowered her eyes. The sentence was quiet. Not bitter, just true. The cabin door closed with a heavy seal. The sounds of the terminal disappeared at once. No more rolling suitcases. No distant announcements. No sustenance from the jet bridge. Only the low hum of the aircraft, the soft click of seat belts, and rain brushing against the windows. Flight 826 pushed back from the gate nearly an hour late. Marcus Bennett remained in seat 3A, the same seat he had paid for. The same seat he had been told he did not belong in. Angela Foster moved through the cabin, checking seat belts and overhead bins. Her steps were quiet, professional, normal, that mattered. There was no special treatment now. No nervous apology every few minutes. No attempt to turn Marcus into a symbol instead of a passenger. Just respect. Across the aisle, Harold Whitmore stared through the window. His reflection floated against the wet glass. The gold watch on his wrist no longer seemed important. Evelyn sat beside him, with both hands resting on her handbag. She had apologized. Harold had not yet. Some truths entered quickly. Others had to sit beside a person for a long time before they were allowed inside. Captain Rebecca Hayes spoke over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We will be departing shortly. I also want to acknowledge that what occurred during boarding did not meet the standard of respect every passenger deserves. The incident has been fully documented and will be reviewed independently. No one clapped. That was better. Some moments were too serious for applause. Marcus looked out the window as the aircraft rolled toward the runway. Blue taxiway lights moved through the rain like small stars. His phone buzzed once. A message from Olivia. The Bennett Digital Board has approved the suspension. Westbridge Air has accepted the independent review terms. No implementation work will resume until findings and corrective actions are delivered. Marcus read it twice. The decision would be felt far beyond the cabin. Westbridge Air needed the Bennett platform badly. Its customer service system was outdated. Complaints were disappearing between departments. Patterns of unequal treatment were being missed because no one could see the full record. Marcus had the power to delay the solution. He also had the responsibility not to use that power carelessly. He typed a reply. Continue payroll and contractor commitments. Preserve the project team. Suspend executive approval only. No one uninvolved should lose income because of this. Olivia answered within seconds. Understood. Marcus placed the phone face down. That was what power looked like when it was used with discipline. Not revenge, not public destruction, a boundary, a consequence, a demand for change. The engines deepened beneath the floor. The aircraft turned onto the runway. Barbara Collins reached across the aisle and touched Marcus lightly on the sleeve. Thank you, she said. Marcus looked at her. For what? For staying. Her voice trembled. If you had moved, I think all of us would have told ourselves it was easier that way. Marcus held her gaze. That is how unfairness survives. Barbara nodded. By making surrender look reasonable, the aircraft began to accelerate. The pressures pushed everyone back into their seats. Rain streaked across the window, faster and faster until the runway lights blurred into gold and white lines. Then the wheels left the ground. Chicago fell away beneath them. For a moment, Marcus closed his eyes. He remembered his father, a postal worker with tired hands and a silver watch he wore every day for 30 years. A man who had saved money in envelopes so Marcus could attend college. A man who had once been followed through a department store because an employee assumed he could not afford the coat he was buying. His father had not spoken about that day with anger. He had simply told Marcus, never let another person's doubt become your definition. Marcus had carried those words into classrooms, offices, and boardrooms. Today, he had carried them into seat 3A. The aircraft climbed above the clouds, shaking eased. Angela dimmed the cabin lights. Jason Miller saved the original video to 2 secure locations, then put his phone away. He knew the recording might become evidence. He also knew the most important part had already changed him. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was deciding that someone else's dignity mattered more than your comfort. Harold finally turned from the window. He looked at Marcus. His face was tight with embarrassment. I should not have asked for your seat, he said. The words came out stiffly, but they came. Marcus studied him. No, he said. You should not have. Harold swallowed. I thought being a loyal customer meant something. It does. Marcus's voice remained calm. It means you deserve good service. It does not mean someone else deserves less. Harold looked down. The lesson did not soften him immediately. Real lessons rarely did. But he heard it. That was a beginning. 3 weeks later, Westbridge Air announced the results of the independent review. The report confirmed that Marcus had been properly ticketed and had never created a safety threat. It found that Claire Dawson had ignored verified passenger information. Thomas Keller had escalated the situation without establishing a legitimate operational reason, and management language had been used to disguise an unfair decision. Claire was removed from premium service and placed into a formal retraining and disciplinary process. Thomas was reassigned from cabin management. Westbridge Air also created a new review policy. No passenger could be removed from an assigned premium seat for another customer's preference without written operational justification and supervisory verification. Bennett Digital did not cancel the partnership. Marcus made the company earn it back. The contract resumed only after Westbridge accepted independent oversight, bias response training, protected reporting channels, and regular publication of service equality data. The system Marcus built would help expose unfair situations, but he never pretended software alone could fix people. Data could reveal a problem. Only character could change it. Months later, Marcus flew Westbridge Air again. He sat in seat 3A. Angela Foster greeted him by name, then greeted every other passenger with the same warmth. That was the change he wanted. Not fear when a powerful man entered the cabin. Respect before anyone knew who held the power. Marcus looked out over the clouds and rested one hand over his father's old silver watch. He had not won because he was a chief executive officer. He had won because the truth was documented. Witnesses spoke, and he refused to accept humiliation as the price of peace. His title forced the airline to listen. His humanity should have been enough, and that was the lesson that remained long after the flight landed. Dignity should never depend on clothing, wealth, race, age, or status. Respect should not be an upgrade, it should come standard. If this story reminded you of a moment when someone was judged before they were understood, share it with someone who still believes silence keeps the peace. Sometimes silence only protects the wrong person, and if you believe every human being deserves the same rules, the same fairness, and the same respect, leave a comment saying, "Stand for dignity."